All right, we are live. I'll go through. I'm on mobile, so hopefully I can see everybody. If I miss anyone, let me know. Brooke Brown.
Here.
Tom Farrell.
Here.
Ronald Hasso.
Here.
Wallace Grainer.
Here.
Meredith Knight.
Here.
David Raymond. I know David's here.
Yeah.
All right. And that's all we have right now, Tom, for the strike force.
And Amber is on call.
Yes.
For the record. Okay. Any public comments of anybody that would like to speak, or any of our members that would like to bring up anything that's not on the agenda? And I don't see any hands, so we will kind of go on through that. I'm going to take items 2, 3, 4, and 5 as one motion, and then we'll get a motion and a second, and then we'll discuss it if that's okay. These are our minutes. And Ashley told me if I didn't go ahead and approve these minutes, something bad was going to happen to me. So I thought I would not take the chance that she'll come get me. So anyway, if I could get a motion to approve these minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes.
And do we have a second?
I'll second that motion.
There we go. We have a second. And discussion. I don't know if anybody's had a chance. I've looked at them. I think they're accurate, but if somebody has any amendments or changes they would like to make, please feel free to bring that up now, or we can amend those later if anybody catches something later on, if that's okay. And not seeing anybody make any comments, could I have approval? And we'll do it the same way. We'll do it reverse. If you are in favor of doing this, just keep your hand down. If you have a negative vote, just raise your hand. And I don't see any hands, so the minutes are approved. Excellent. Thank y'all very much. I think actually I did my job on the minutes.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Item number 6 is a working session with the BK Road Subcommittee, including discussion on front, rear, and side setbacks, green belts, impervious cover, height restrictions, and other concerns on individual commercial properties. Just to start this off, one of the things that I did do is I did meet with I called and talked to the representative of the 2 properties that are vacant on BK's Road that were not, that we were, that appears to be very difficult to develop. And that's 2708 and 2710 BK's Road. And they have, the status of that is they had a 7,500 square foot office building that they were looking at that would have spanned the creek, and the parking would have been on the north side of the creek. It was a 3-story building because part of it was parking. They could obviously make it 2 stories without too much trouble on a small building like that. But they are planning on, they pulled that right now, and it's just kind of on hold. But that was the proposal on that site. And then they may come back, they may not, they may amend it or whatever on that. But I did want to just let you know what I found out on that. So
It's like it could be developed.
they think it could be by spanning the creek with the building. I like the eye center of Texas.
Okay.
Which is no, as far as I can tell, we don't have a ordinance that prevents that from happening. They still have to deal with the Corps and FEMA and all that, but that's separate from the city of Rollingwood.
Right.
And Amber, I think I'm correct when I say there's not a ordinance specifically that prohibits them from spanning the creek.
No.
So They could do it if physically they can do it. Now that's, that's another question. I don't have the answer to that. But I did want to at least bring that up. I did have a call in to the Park Hills Baptist Church, but I haven't visited with them yet. But I'll endeavor to do that as soon as I can. Those are things I committed to do last time. So with that being said, I think where we left this last time is we wanted to look at the existing, where the existing buildings were on the north side of BK's Road, and how far they were back from the residential areas of Rollingwood. And if y'all would like to, we can go through each one and just start on, we can start on the west side. That's the only reason I've just got the way my papers are set up. On the west side of BK's Road, starting at 3102 BK's Road. And
Would you like me to share the document that you passed out? See if I can.
yeah, that'd be fine. This would be page 1. It doesn't show up very well on there, does it?
Is it too small?
Pretty small, but that's okay. It's still, I think it gives an idea of what we had. I don't know where I have but I calculated that it was around 20 feet to the, from 3102 to the back of the lots that are off of, that are in Rollingwood, off of Peak Road, South Peak. Now this building, and I didn't calculate I didn't do the setbacks on 3160 and 3144. Those are the two on the very west side of BK's Road that abut Rollingwood Drive, because they don't really have any residential areas that they in Rollingwood that they abut or
So-
close to.
Is the 22.75 or the 25.70?
The 25.70 is incorrect. I don't know why that popped up, but apparently I drug a deal. And if you notice when I did this, it was a little bit, it's around 20 feet is what I calculated when I went over there and kind of measured it. So I may have gone over just a little bit on that measurement, just drug it a little bit further than I probably should have. But I think it's around 20 feet.
Tom,
Yes, sir.
I printed this all out, and because I see no lines that indicate to me where the lot is, but I see a dot with 3102. I don't know what direction 2275 goes from there to the top of the page, to the right-hand side of the page, to the bottom of the page, but
I'm sorry. It goes to the closest. I took that, I tried to get from the building to the closest residential lot, Polly. And that would be going due east.
South Peak would be the closest residential lot.
That's correct.
And do you have any idea the dimension from the dot to the dot at South Peak?
It's around 20 feet to the lot line.
From where to where? See, I have no lines. That's what's puzzling me. I don't know how to read.
Sorry. Mine has lines. It just didn't show up on this. This is from the edge of the building to the edge of the residential lot line.
So they're built within 22.75 feet of their rear property line.
When I measured it, it actually was around 20 feet rather than the 22.75.
And then do you remember the width of the building? How much building flat area they have?
That I don't have that information, Molly. Sorry.
Because I'm asking the question for other reasons, but it's up for sale right now.
Yeah, this building incidentally has indirect access on BK's Road, but its primary access is off of Rollingwood Drive.
Okay, this is the one that sits on the top of the cliff.
Yes.
That's what okay, that's what I want to know. So I went out and looked at it because I wanted to understand it because I knew we were going to be looking at a map. And then I got the map and the drawing apparently was too faint to print. So then it left me in a lurch as to what I'm looking at.
Sorry, I just, when I tried to send this over, I sent it to the city and the city sent it out, and I think it just didn't print out as quite as accurate as we wanted to. But
Oftentimes the copy of a copy through the email or however, by the time you've scanned it 2 or 3 times, you lose a lot.
that's correct. Now, the interesting part about this, and I want everybody to kind of know this, the lot, the residential house that's on 5100 Rollingwood Drive is actually zone C1 also, same as that office building.
Don't they abut that building at the
Yeah.
rear?
Well, the 2 lots abut, but not the property itself, not the house itself, but the properties do abut, yes.
So technically there wouldn't be subject to the 100-foot setback right now because the building behind them is commercial, but it really should be residential.
It should be, but it does abut 2 residential lots on the east side. Number 2 South Peak and number 4 South Peak.
Got it. I understand.
And this doesn't show up on any of the maps that I brought, but I thought you'd just want to know that.
I know the area well enough to understand that the other 2 houses face east.
That's correct. Then the next 2 properties that I had were 3010 and 30008. And these I had calculated, and again, I went over the line just a little bit with my drawing, and I apologize, but this is a little over 50 feet on 3010, and it's 75 feet on 3008 was my calculation. And I'm just going to kind of go through all of these and answer any questions that I can answer.
12 occupied. Is there a building on 3012?
There is not a building on, this is, I'm sorry, this is, let me see.
3012 is undeveloped, Tom.
Is undevelopable right now, but it has a permit pending with the city of Rollingwood to build a relatively little small office building on it.
And they do have their plans in. Their plat was recently conditionally approved, and they do have their building plans in for an office.
And they are obviously going to be within 100 feet of a residential lot. Is that correct?
They are, but because they had their application in before the new zoning ordinances took effect, they are under the old zoning code.
Okay. So they're 30 feet right now.
Yes.
Okay.
Hey, Tom, this is Ryan.
Hey, Ryan.
On 3102 going back, do you happen to know what the width of that lot is? 3102?
No, I do not.
The reason I asked, I was just wondering if it's even 100 feet wide. I assume it is, but
Yeah, it would be, let's see, if this is 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, a little over 100 feet wide.
What page are we on? I'm missing the one that you're talking about.
I'm just estimating, how wide is the lot on 3102 Big Caves Road?
because presumably, am I correct that under the current ordinance, they have to be 100 feet away from the lots at 6, 8, and 10 Peak?
Yes.
And if they're 105 feet, they would have no,
Basically have 5 feet to build on.
okay.
Yeah. And of course that would, I mean, they were grandfathered because they were there before this ordinance went into place.
Sure, sure. But under the current ordinance, they would be unable to build anything on that lot.
Of any consequence. They would have a
and-
little bit, but nothing of any consequence. That's correct.
Yeah, and Tom, they would only be grandfathered under Texas law if they actually started the development process prior to the new rear greenbelt requirement.
Yeah, and I think, David, help me, y'all are attorneys, but if I file a application, that starts the permit time.
Yeah, if you file anything to start the development process, therefore, in other words, anything, a plat, anything that basically shows the intent to begin development and actually start the development process, start asking for permits and approvals, that under Texas state law triggers it.
Now, just so you know, 3102 was built prior to the ordinance. So it's older than the ordinance. So,
Yeah, I think that you're using grandfathered in two different ways.
Yeah.
Tom, you're saying the existing building is grandfathered in. I think David was talking about the ability to build
yes,
if you had plans on file prior to the change. I mean, the reason it's your meeting, but it seems to me that we ought to talk about these lots and try to come up with some consensus, if we have one, on what we would do with a lot like this,
yeah,
because we're going to have the same kind of issue, I imagine, across Bee Caves Road, where if you took 100 feet out of the lot, you couldn't, but there's nothing you could build.
Yeah.
So is
Now,
it worth having the conversation now when we're on the first one of these?
we can do that. I was going to go through this, answer the questions from last meeting, but we can go through each one, and I'm happy to do that right now.
Well,
So
the
let's
reason
just-
I suggested it is just because we might be able to come up with some kind of framework
Yeah, no, I think it's a
to
good
analyze
idea.
the rest of them. And I don't know what the answer is, and I don't have a proposal, but it's hard for me to imagine that the answer of this committee is going to be that everybody's frozen in and can't do anything in perpetuity. But maybe that is the consensus of the community. I don't know.
Yeah. Now, I would say this on this 3102 Bee Caves Road. You know, if I were looking at this from the standpoint of the way that building is fit, I would calculate this to be the side setback. And if I'm not mistaken, our 100-foot ordinance says on the rear setback, or maybe it says, no, it's as close to it. So it'd be that.
Well,
My-
is the 100-foot ordinance that you're referring to, is that the 100-foot green belt?
yes,
1-109?
yes. Yes, Brooke, that's what I'm referring to.
Okay, I'll read it to you. I'm not sure it's tied to the rear.
No, it's not. It just says no development within the area.
But it's the boundary between a residential district and the impervious cover on a lot in a C1 or C2 district.
Right.
So that's not side or rear or front. It's
No.
any line. It looks like.
So this building is kind of unusual because it frankly has been, it's been there the whole time. So Ryan, I'll just start this off by taking the position that I think these places like this that have been there, that we ought to have the 30-foot setback, even though that exceeds what they have on here. Because I think anybody that built there on South Peak the building was already there. And I'll just start the discussion by that. We might as well, this is kind of the oddest one because it's kind of tucked back and it's not really one of the ones that that people can see very well. I
Is that
doubt
an
it.
office right
If
there,
you
Tom?
didn't know this office building was there, you wouldn't know it.
And so Tom, to that point, I've lived in Rollingwood for, I don't know, almost, gosh, it'll be like about 9.5 years. I never knew that was an office. I always thought that was a house.
No, it's an office.
It looks like a house.
It
Yeah, it
does
does.
look like that. And it was built to residential construction standards.
Yeah, and it's kind of perched up there on the hillside.
And it has a driveway that actually goes to 3144 BK's Road, which I'm not sure, Wally, you can maybe help me with this. Do they actually have legal access to cross there?
Yes, they had, the predecessor to me owning that property adjacent to the west granted them an easement to get up the hill, because otherwise they had no identity on Bee Cave Road, even though that's where they're on Bee Cave Road.
Okay,
That's why they have an address on Bee Cave Road. Otherwise, their address would be on Rollingwood Drive.
right. Okay, thank you, Wally. Okay. So let's just start with that we went back on this and went 30 feet for this lot. Because if it's 100 feet, basically they don't have anywhere to build.
Now, Tom, are you talking about a front or rear setback or a side setback or all directions?
On every lot that we'll talk about, with the exception of this one, I would be talking about the rear setback, but on this one, it has to be from the closest residential area, which in this case is a side setback, actually.
Okay.
Now, currently, they're within 20 feet of the residential lot.
Tom, weren't they, when they built that, in compliance with the commercial use zoning of that time, which would have been before 2002?
Wally, this was built before I really can't answer that, because it was built, this was probably built in the, I'd say in the 70s or early 80s. It's been there a long time.
I owned the property next door in 86, and it was there when I bought the property next door.
Right. So it probably predated our ordinances on that. So let me just kind of get some other
Okay,
people's
that-
opinion.
Yeah.
This is obviously, if we did 100 feet on this lot, it's unbuildable. This is going to be a commercial, going to be an office use. Any way we look at it, it doesn't have frontage to be a resident, to be a retail. So it's going to be an office use. And I would say the number should be 30 feet or 20 feet. That would be the two that I would put out there just to start the discussion.
And you're confident that 5100 is currently zoned commercial?
It is.
Okay.
I spoke to the owner.
Well, what did she just say? I was trying to get the address.
5100 is zoned commercial.
I don't understand the relationship between 5100 and 3102.
Well,
If you-
5100 Rollingwood,
the driveway to 3102 goes by 5100 Rollingwood
All
Drive.
right, okay, same
And-
property, two addresses.
Well, no, the 5100 Rollingwood Drive is actually got a house on it, a residential house, and it's being used for a residential house, but it's actually zoned commercial.
Got it, okay. I was trying to understand the 5102. We're jumping on addresses. It confused me.
Sorry, didn't mean to do that.
nor did I.
I think this comes to the meat of the heart of our issues. That's why I was hoping we could just kind of talk about it. I would love to hear if anybody has thoughts on the strike force. How do we begin to reconcile a zoning ordinance that people did buy houses based on an existing use that is in conflict with the current zoning ordinance, and the the interest of the community in having something there that might be more valuable from tax purposes. I mean, that's the crux, I think, of our entire analysis. And I don't have a good answer to that, but I would definitely love to hear people's thoughts on how do we begin to resolve those conflicts. And if there are community members that want to weigh in, I'd encourage them to also. I don't know if anybody's on the call, but I do think this is the crux of our issue.
I'm not, and Ryan, I agree with you, and I appreciate you bringing that that way. I'm not being able to see on my screen, which I'm sure there's a way, I just don't know how to do it. There we go. If we have somebody that would like to have a input, please just raise your hand, and we'll certainly be glad to hear from you. But I think on a lot like this, and this is probably, again, the single worst one to start with, because it's so tucked back there, and it's going to be an office use. It's been an office use for decades, and it's roughly 20 feet from the residential lot lines right now. So in my mind, the setback there for future development on this lot should be anywhere from 20 to 30 feet. That would be my opinion, Orion.
Tom,
Yes, sir.
I agree with you. And I think the rear setback to make it actually at a develop, I mean, if you don't do something, you have an undevelopable lot. So he's got to constantly remodel the building and work on the grandfathering basis and such. It makes the lot really more work to develop than it's probably going to be worth economically. So you need to come up with something that lets it be redevelopable within reason. And you've come up with what I think is in reason.
Well, and also another point is, keep in mind that, the setback was 30 feet for at least as long as anyone can remember before it was increased to 100 feet. And so all the properties that were developed with a 30-foot setback. And so basically it's the buildings from a developable standpoint are kind of, where they're going to be and where a developer has decided they're going to be. I have, because of what I do, I know a lot of developers out there, and I've just kind of anecdotally had a lot of conversations off the cuff with a lot of developers saying, hey, I'm not going to hold you to this or anything else, but let's talk about, this stretch, what do you see as the biggest barriers? And the biggest barriers are basically, unreasonable setbacks and impervious cover limitations. And, I think, to kind of get to the point of, reconciling the conflicts, I think with the 30-foot setbacks, the development is situated on those properties that are developed, kind of where the floodplain and other development limitations are going to lend themselves. So I don't think, for the life of me, I don't know, what the 100-foot green belt was meant to serve or protect, other than possibly just trying to make those it where, you couldn't redevelop any of the commercial properties. The other thing is, you have a height limitation on commercial properties that is lower, 5 feet lower than the height restriction on residential properties. So if the height restriction was not commensurate, I could make a more, stronger argument for why it should be 100 feet to move it back further away, et cetera. But with, the height limitation being shorter, and also given the other development constraints on those properties and projects, particularly if you're, adding in, depending on slopes and stuff, the need for modern water quality features, et cetera, you're effectively, I think at 30 feet, going to get redevelopment of a property basically back in the same development envelope, because that's kind of where I think the environmental constraints and the developable constraints are going to end you. So I don't understand, kind of sitting here now, you know, what the thought process was behind the 100-foot greenbelt, particularly on properties that we'd be talking about redeveloping.
Just to give you a little history on that, David, that came about because of Rollingwood Town Center.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, it was decided to include it all on the north side of BK's Road, but with the intention that when we had a development, we would be looking at making a change on that.
Well, and you know, Rollingwood Town Center is somewhat unique because that was actually a, you know, raw land development.
And this was done just blanket, but it was done with the expectation that we'd be amending that as we went through, either through a variance or through however process that we went through.
Yeah.
Now, there's some question whether or not, Wally's had a question whether or not a green belt could be granted a variance, and I can't answer that. But I do know that you could change that, and I assume that the council is willing to do that if that's the case, because that was not the intent to be. It was supposed to be somewhat flexible to how we did that on that. So we're dealing with this one, and this one is a little bit different. And I'm just going back to 3102, Ryan, just to kind of stay on this one. This one actually has since we don't have a setback on our side setback, and that's where this one actually abuts residential lots. In that case, so I was going to just assume on this that we're going to be looking at bringing this back to the older standards, which would be 30 feet back from the residence on that. And that's why I said that. To address, I've got a lot of comments I can make on how we do this, but you know, I think that on this one, since this one is so unusual and it has to have some kind of variance on it, or you can't rebuild it, you can't redo anything on it, then I think that the 30 feet seemed to me to be a reasonable number to come up with on that. So that's why I put that out there.
Tom?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm with you on the 30-foot setback on this lot. The only comment I might have, and I don't know if this is the time to talk about it, but just a place saver, if not, is that 3102 only has access to Rollingwood Drive. And, you know, we've talked about addressing or combining C1 and C2. And the question I have in my mind is whether for these three properties where their principal access 3102 and 3144, I think their principal access is on Rollingwood Drive. Do we want to permit retail where the road access is on Rollingwood Drive?
Pardon me for interrupting, but 3102 accesses from Bee Caves Road at the intersection of the driveway to the property I own next door to the west.
Brooke, but Brooke is correct. The primary access is off Rollingwood Drive.
I don't think there is an access currently to that.
There's an active asphalt paved driveway there.
Yeah, there is an easement.
If you
There's
own the
an
building
easement.
and you say to somebody, come up to my office off of Bee Caves Road, I believe there was, at least for many years, a 3102 sign at the bottom of that.
There is. It's still there. Brooke, they actually have an easement from 3144 that crosses a lot and goes up with a little driveway.
Okay.
It's fairly steep, but it is actually, and I suspect that most people, after they've been there, will go down Rollingwood Drive and turn in there.
I'd agree that would be the case.
And these others, to be very honest, I'm not in favor of, if you wanted to go with these other lots, 3160 and 3144, they have the potential, and we went through that before, of being a retail oriented deal, but I would prefer that the entrance to those be off of BK's Road as opposed to being off of Rollingwood Drive. We have enough problems with the McDonald's driveway right now with the retail. So
And it-
off Rollingwood Drive.
Well, that's a place saver. I don't know if that's something you want to talk about now, but I just wanted to bring it up while we were focused on that lot.
Yeah.
Thank
On
you.
this lot, we're just talking about the, I've looked at a couple things on here, Ryan, just to put that there. The, you know, the front side setback that I would recommend would be 5 feet on BK's Road. Because we have on most of the properties. Now, these properties have not had the benefit of the TxDOT right of way. But they're going to get that, and so it'd be 5 feet back from the TxDOT right of way is what the number would be that I would put in there for the front setback. Side setback we have a 0, and I would keep it that way. And on the rear setback on all but a couple of these lots, I would say it would be 30 feet that would come in on there. The impervious cover, you know, that's an arbitrary number. There's not any way that 50% or 30% or 60% was there for any reason. And that is an engineering issue that, David, that they have to, right now, if I were to want to try to build something on BK's Road, I would still fall within the Rolling Woods water detention ordinances, I believe. And if they don't, we need to expand it to the commercial district on that, just to keep flooding to a minimum on that. But I would put the impervious cover, basically leave that up to the engineers to have how they handle the drainage on that.
Currently in the C1 and C2, I believe it's 50% impervious cover.
It is 50%, but I'm saying that we could do it the same way we do the residential properties that say you have to have the engineers do the study that they're not draining off of their property and creating a drainage issue downstream.
On the drainage side, yeah.
Yeah.
And then they're also gonna have to comply with TCQ Edwards on the
That's correct.
commercial side too.
With respect to the, sorry, go ahead.
Tom,
Oh, Wally, I'm sorry.
really, all the properties, except possibly the ones at the top of the hill you're talking about and off of Peak Road, starting with the the property that's now for sale, don't they all basically drain to Bee Caves Road and down Bee Caves Road to Dry Creek? And if they're down beyond Dry Creek, crossing Bee Caves, they all drain to the rear into Dry Creek. I don't understand the big concern about where they're going to drain. They have really no choice.
Well, we're required, because we're in the Barton Creek Edwards Aquifer Conservation District, to address those issues as we go through, Wally.
Yeah,
David,
and
go
while
ahead.
I don't think it's a where issue, it's a volume, and it's a volume and timing issue.
So all of this water, anywhere drainage comes down, ultimately gets into Dry Creek and affects the buildings downstream, the property owners downstream also. So you have to take that into account as we go through.
Well, I'll tell you that the volume of water that comes off of the Randall parking lot, crosses Rollingwood Drive and goes down past that lot I used to own is tremendous.
Mhm.
And I don't know of them doing anything to contain that in any way. So that's now being passed as a responsibility to all the Rollingwood property owners to the east.
Actually used to be a pond back behind there years ago. And Rollingwood Drive, as if you were here long enough, was one of the more dangerous areas we had, because it would flood from that. And we actually had several cars get washed off right there.
I believe it.
Yeah, we did.
Tom, I have something to consider, just to throw out, and I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about it, but maybe it begins to bridge some of the conflict. Perhaps we should think about, and I'm particularly just concerned for the residential lots that are right there.
Yeah.
Perhaps some compromise to consider is to limit. Right now, I don't think we should be talking, when we're talking about commercial lot abutting residential, I don't think we should be talking about side setbacks or front or rear, because it, as I read the statute, it's just 100 all the way around.
Yeah, I agree.
So perhaps a compromise that could generate the support of the folks on Peak, South Peak, because I'm guessing they will very much be against changing the setback behind them. Perhaps a compromise would be to limit the building from 30 feet to 70 feet or something like that to 1 story. So that we could change the setback, but for the first X number of feet, I'm just throwing it out there, the first X number of feet in that is close to or adjacent to a residential home, there could be a limit of the height. And I mean, what obviously really needs to happen is we need to combine those lots, but we can't force people to do that.
No.
You know, that lot may end up even in some kind of compromise,
Well,
only be buildable to 1 story, but I really, you know, I feel for the people who live right there, who built their homes. And I agree that many of them built them probably within a 30-foot setback and not a 100-foot setback at the time. But that one at 10 is pretty new.
yeah, it is.
I don't know when it was built, but it is new and it is beautiful. And they spent a lot on it. Maybe a compromise, because here we don't have the terrain the terrain adjustment that we do in other places. Like the building behind me, there's a big terrain fall.
Yeah.
Not as much as people think there is, but there is one. Whereas here, I'm guessing the backyard of 8 Peak is on the same height as the 3102 that is next to it.
It's very close. Now, when you get to 3144 and 3160, it drops off fairly sharply there. It's probably a 30-foot elevational change, I would guess.
So we have no, and I guess is the current height restrictions, do we know what they are on 60 and 44?
Two-story.
Okay. So it sounds like no one would have any trouble with 60 and 44 being 2-story retail or office, whatever the developer wanted to do.
Yes, I certainly would not. I would add that I would, again, the only thing of those 2 lots that concerned me was the entrance. The entrance to those, the 3144 is not a particular problem. The entrance to 3160 is a problem, because if you're coming in or out of there, it can affect the traffic coming off of the intersection of Rollingwood Drive and B Caves Road. And
For either of those streets, I would imagine it can affect the traffic.
it can. And on that one, I would prefer to, if it becomes a retail, it needs to come off of B Caves Road. Much safer for us.
I think Ryan has a point, because I think we've got to also consider the 5100 Rollingwood, which is now a 1-story office that looks like a house, what the height restriction would be there.
I have my own feeling about 5100. I think the city needs to rezone that to be residential. It's been residential since it was built. And I just think that the zoning needs to change on that.
Okay,
I'm pretty sure that's 2-story.
It may be, but its current use has been residential since it was built.
So,
The gentleman that lives there, I think, actually built it. And I think that would be my recommendation on that. I really don't like to see the Rollingwood Drive have the commercial activity. And I don't think really this is big enough to actually do anything from a commercial standpoint. So I think that it's prudent to do that. I will also add that this 5100 is not hooked to our sewer system. It's actually hooked to Westlake Hills sewer system.
Hey, I have a couple questions about 3102. Is that 2-story right now?
Wally?
Yes,
Yeah.
3102.
Yeah, and-
3102 is 2-story. It's a 2-story, rather modern straight line type structure. So it's got a stucco exterior.
Yeah. And so I'm trying to understand. So it looks like there's a 30-foot, it looks like it's set 30 feet off of the property line there. I'm trying to understand that the house next to it at 10 North Peak looks like it was built in, completed in 2016, so about 5 years ago. I'm trying to understand the rationale for why we would then basically prevent someone from rebuilding a 2-story office on that property.
Well, let me make a suggestion, David. This is where I feel on that. I'm warming to the 1-story, and for this reason. If you look at that lot and you look at how much of it is used right now, it's a very small use for the size of that lot. You could double the size of that building and make it 1-story and have the same square footage.
But I know that you could park it, Tom. You got to consider parking in that.
I think you would still have sufficient parking. I'd have to look at that, but that is an awful big lot. I will tell you that.
It was a flag, don't forget.
Yes, it is. It is a flag lot, but it still has, significant.
I mean, I'm just, if I own that property and it's a property that I own, I'm going to say, hey, guys, it's a 2-story office here. This person came and built a really big house right next to it, but they knew what they're building right next to.
well, when they built, they probably thought the 100-foot setback would prevent any large commercial development next behind them.
I guarantee you that they did not think and bet saying, oh, if they ever redevelop it. I mean, when you build a house, you build what's there. So that house could be, that office could be there.
I'm not sure I agree with that, but
Yeah.
I think.
Well, I mean,
Well,
I think also you start setting yourself up for some regulatory takings issues too, but that's just me.
Well, we would be giving them back more. I mean, that's the thing. If there's a takings issue, it's now. Theoretically, under some kind of compromise, we'd be giving them more ability. Because right now they can't rebuild, period.
If
If there's a regulatory takings, it's now.
Yeah.
Conceivably, yeah.
I mean, and maybe there's more
I just-
flexibility in the compromise. I do think that 8 and 6 don't have anything in their backyards now. Maybe some, I guess, parking lot.
Parking, yeah.
But they don't have a 2-story building in their backyards. And again, I may be being too neighborhood focused. I don't know, but it does seem to me that part of our job is to give a voice to the community members who are most affected. And if we were giving this property owner more rights than they have now by eliminating the front setback on bee caves, and by eliminating the 100-foot, which we both agree makes it unbuildable right now, then we'd be giving them substantially more rights. Maybe it's 50 feet. I don't know. I agree on that particular one. If you had a 50 feet 2-story, it wouldn't help you because you'd have only 50 feet of 2-story and they probably wouldn't build that. I'm just trying to come up with some kind of criteria or scenario that might help us as we go down the road, trying to figure out some meaningful, plausible way to help bridge the gap between the two competing interests.
Well, and
This
But
actually,
I get that they built their, but what I'm saying is they built their house next to an existing office that was 2-story, and we're saying, you can't build back roughly what you had before.
David, say this, that they built their house today. There is, if you actually look at that property, and I've walked by it many times, there's a lot of privacy because of the way the building is built.
Mhm.
If we expanding the setback, the allowable, narrowing the setback and expanding
It's 30
the
feet now, Brooke.
limiting the, you want to go ahead?
There's 30 feet now, so, I mean.
No, it's feet now.
It's what?
It's 100 feet now.
The building is 30 feet from the property line, Brooke.
actually, David, I think it's around 20 feet from the property.
Yeah, okay.
But they couldn't rebuild that building if we're talking about limiting.
Yes.
Go ahead, Brooke.
If we're talking about reducing the required impervious cover, reducing the setback, then how do we sell this to the residential properties along South Peak? Because they do back up to it. If I were the homeowner there, I want to ensure that my privacy is not invaded while we try to expand. I think we do two things. We're trying to maintain the privacy they have and expand the use of the commercial lot. But I want to be sure we can do both.
Let me make one comment on this. This is going to be, does anybody think that 3102 is going to be anything other than a recommendation for office?
We don't know.
Yeah, you can know. You rezone it for office, and then they have to come get a variance.
No, that's not what I'm saying. Is there a market for this from a retail standpoint for your access? Because the only access you really have is an easement through the adjacent lot at 3144 or Rollingwood Drive. And you've got you'd have a long way, you wouldn't have any frontage of on any road. So I just can't see this being anything but office building.
As the lot line exists today, I agree with you, but
Yeah.
part of this vision document that we've had and we're talking about is, as my understanding, is trying to encourage people to join lots and come up with inventive
agree.
solutions. And what I don't want to do is limit the ability of future property owners to do that in a way that would help us. So my personal belief is that almost all of these should get zoned retail and whatever else we think they should be zoned, so that we give property owners the flexibility to do what they want.
And I agree with you. The only difference I'll tell you on this one, Ryan, is the topo difference between 3102 and 3144. Wally, is that 30 feet?
At least 30, probably closer to 40, because
it's a large
44 is even, is the site level is even with Rollingwood Drive, as is the building to the west, which is on the corner of Rollingwood and Bee Caves. Bee Caves.
And,
The three
and so I just don't see 31. I don't see these 3 lots on the corner here being connected for retail just because of the topography that occurs on that. And that's why
I see what you're saying.
This is just this lot is a tough one to do. I want to make sure that we protect. I will say this, David, and several of the houses on Peak, and I cannot remember if number 10 South Peak was one of them, and I think it was. Yes, it's a 2016, but I think they tore down a house there that was there before 2016.
They did. They did tear down a house.
So
Trustee.
No, not on 2016. I think they may have redone it, but I think number 8 was there for quite a while before that.
That was all trees.
Yeah. So if I go back and Ryan, just following up where you are on this, which if we did one story and we said, okay, you're going to do one story, but you right now they're within 20 feet of the property line, approximately. And we said, look, if you redo this building, we want you to move it back an additional 10 feet, 30 feet. And you can have the same square footage you have right now. And if you have to do a 2-story on it, you elevate part of the building as you go back. The part closest to the residential lots would be 1 story. And then if you needed to do 2-story to get the same square footage you currently have, then you could do 2 stories, but it would be further back from the residential lots. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to do?
It does. And plus, again, we're eliminating front setbacks. So they're going to get whatever additional space that is.
Yeah, but you can't do anything on the front setback because of the topo there.
Yeah, it's
built where it is because it's on that.
on this. And
Is the building at the top of that hill? On the
Yeah,
lot?
and that's why they have to have the shared access drive with the neighboring lot, is because it's perched up. And so you have to come at it, it's perched up here, so you have to come at it from the side and go up.
Well, maybe what the right thing to do is to give the city council a couple of options for that lot and kind of say that we were mixed on what the right thing to do is, that some of the strike force believe that they should just eliminate or make the 100-foot setback a 30-foot setback on that lot, but can keeping the 2-story. And that some of the strike force thought that if we are going to eliminate the 100-foot setback there, that we should limit it to 1 story.
okay.
For the first 50 feet or whatever it is that we feel comfortable with.
Yeah. And
I like making decisions, even if they're mixed decisions, and
I'm
sending it
okay.
on to the city council to make the hard one. Because we don't have to make the hard one. We just have to make a recommendation.
Also, we have to be a little bit worried about, if you say, well, everything else gets 2 stories or 30 feet, except for this one that gets 1 story, you start running afoul of spot zoning. The other thing is, I think that is pretty much, and Wally, I'd be interested in your perspective, but if I'm the property owner and I can only build back 1 story for office, which 1-story office, depending on the use, 2 stories from there, particularly when you're up and you can kind of get some views out across, I think you're basically kind of guaranteeing that it won't be redeveloped. And if that's kind of the goal, then that's okay. But I think it creates a disincentive because you're not going to be able to get the square footage out.
Okay. Well, I agree with Brian. I'll do both ways I'll write that both ways.
I think it's fine.
So it'd be, give them some options. Let me just cover 2 things real quick. 3 things, 3160, 3144, and 5100 Rollingwood Drive. The 3144 and the 3160, of course, be Cave Road. The last time we talked on this, we were going to talk 2-story retail. I would recommend that we reduce the front setback to 5 feet and have the no side setback like we have right now. And then have they don't actually have a rear setback that doesn't abut anywhere that a residential area. So they would be clear. And the impervious cover, I'm thinking that we leave that to the engineers, because I think that the 50% was just a stab at it. It doesn't have anything to do with an engineering deal that I can tell. What's y'all's thought on that? The impervious cover. Let's just talk about the impervious cover.
Tom,
Yes,
I'm
ma'am.
going to raise a question with you about you were saying there's no side or rear setback, but the 100-foot setback goes all the way around.
Well, but these don't abut a these are not within 100 feet of a residential district.
Then I gotta go to,
And it's 30 feet right now on the rear.
but there is a 50% impervious cover limit. So you
That's
could,
correct. That is correct. Now, these lots are a little different. 3160 and 3144 Brook are a little bit different. And I did not have a 30-foot rear setback on this because these are peninsula that are abutting both Rollingwood Drive and BK's Road. So being able to, when you design something on this, it's going to be, gee, where's the front and where's the rear? Because it's going to be, it's not going to be an issue with these.
and I'm looking at the code now, and this is C1 and C2. There is a 20-foot setback from the front lot line and a 30-foot setback from the rear lot line.
That's correct. And I think the front setback lines, if they abut BK Road, should be 5 feet rather than the 20 feet.
Let's just, I think, Tom, for these 3 lots, let's just make clear that we're recommending a 5-foot setback for the properties that, for the edge of the property that borders BK's Road.
That's correct.
That way we don't have any confusion over what's the front and the back.
Yeah.
Do we have a recommendation for the setback to the commercial, or to 60 and 44, and I guess part of 3102, that on its border with Rollingwood Drive?
I would, my personal preference is use the either 20 or 30 feet. It shouldn't be 5 right there. And my inkling is to make it 20 feet.
Off of Rollingwood?
Off of Rollingwood Drive.
What's our residential setback?
20 feet.
Yeah.
Well, from the front.
Yeah.
Front's 30.
30 feet, yeah. Rear is 20.
I mean,
Yes.
I mean, I think it should be at least 30, just because, I mean, that to me is kind of a gateway coming in visually.
I'm fine with
So I kind of like, at least 20 feet there.
The 3160 today is built with closer than the 30 feet.
Yeah.
But that's okay. We're talking about redone, and that's what we're looking at. What are y'all's feeling about 5100?
I would think we need to talk to the property owner to see if they want it rezoned to be residential, and if they do, we should do it for them.
Okay.
On 3160, if we had a 30-foot setback on Rollingwood Drive, does it also become unbuildable?
It's real close. It's not, you don't have much of a building area.
Like, just a master plan where we lay out the map of ultimately what the zoning could be. And then as the property owners want to do the rezoning, that complies with the comprehensive plan, then at that time they could do the zoning.
Yeah,
And I don't,
Thank you, Mary. This one, Ryan, if you took 30 feet the whole way, it pretty much eats up half the lot.
Right, and I think the thing about 3160, or the thing about, 3160, I think there's 2 things going on. I don't think it can comply with the existing setbacks. Plus, I think it's built higher than, I think it's taller than current zoning would allow.
It is. It's 3-story.
Yeah.
So.
And I wonder if that's because of floodplain issues.
They had to put their parking underneath the building to meet code to be able to build a building on that.
Right, to get the flood area
Yeah.
parking. Plus also, Brooke, I think to get to your point also, I think they did I think it also made sense because they put in the parking underneath and kind of building it on stilts like they did takes that first floor out of the floodplain.
Okay. Ryan, does that,
Well, did we, did we decide what we would want for the Rollingwood Drive setback for 3160?
3160, you can't have 30 feet. I can tell you that. It just won't work. That one is, that's why I suggested that we go with like 20 feet right now. And then with the expectation that when you design something, you're going to end up having to come back in and ask for a variance on that. Because it depends on where you would put the building. If you replace the building as is, it's probably within 10 feet of the lot line currently. So, and that's the only, only use you have for that site. I mean, it's hard to see a standalone building there that would do that. So given the configuration of that lot, if you wanted to make it buildable, you'd say, okay, you're going to have a 10-foot setback on Rollingwood Drive for this lot and a 5-foot on BK's Road. And that would give you a building pad on there if you did that. Does that make sense?
Are they, do we know if these lots meet the current impervious cover requirements?
I do not know, Brooke. These were probably built, this has been there for quite a while. Both of these buildings have been there quite a while. Now, on 3144, I would like to see a 30-foot setback there.
From Rollingwood Drive?
From Rollingwood Drive, that's correct.
And these are the only 3 properties that border Rollingwood Drive, right? That we have to deal with.
Yeah, and well, it's 4 of them, 5100 being the 4th.
Right.
Yeah, that is correct.
I'm just, again, I share a little bit of David's spot zoning concerns. I think, as I understand it, and David would know it better than me, but as I understand it, spot zoning means you have to treat like properties similarly, that if they're
Within a zone.
That's right. If they have the same issues, you have to treat them the same, which is why I keep on coming back to, can we set some kind of criteria on which we're basing our decisions that make sense across the board,
Sure.
rather than just winging it on each one. Understanding that some are so dissimilar. 3160, as I understand it, is so dissimilar to every other property that it would not be considered spot zoning to have its own rules, because there's nothing else like it. There's nothing else that has the problems it has. But again, David would know it better than I do. This is not my area of practice.
Well, right now, the 3160 is a tough one, because if you're going to build on it, you're not going to be able to have very much of a setback on BK's Road. I mean on Rollingwood Drive. Not going to happen. 3144 is fairly easy, and I would like to see a 30-foot setback on that. And if we keep 5100 commercial, I'd like to see a 30-foot setback on that also.
So I'm comfortable with your recommendation for 4402 and 3144, 3102, 5100, all having a 30-foot setback from Rollingwood Drive and a 5-foot setback from Bee Caves Road. One other thing that makes 3160 different is it has a commercial, it has McDonald's across the street, which makes it fundamentally different when you're driving in. You're not expecting a house across the street, whereas the others have homes across the street. So I do think it's fundamentally different. It's okay to have different rules there.
Yeah, and I'm suggesting that we do 5 foot on BK's Road, like on all of them, but on this one on Rollingwood Drive, I think it probably needs to due to the shape of the lot, it needs to be about 10 feet. But it could be 20, and you still have a building pad because we're moving the building closer to BK's Road, which might be advantaged on that. So.
Are
if
you
we-
10 foot on, you're saying now, Tom, 10 foot on Rollingwood Drive?
I'm thinking that if we do the 5 foot on BK's Road, we could have up to 20 feet on Rollingwood Drive and it would still be a building pad.
I had thought you were saying 30 feet on 3144.
I do on 3144, but on 3160, because it's on the corner
Okay,
and it's
I
a
got
curved lot like that, then it doesn't have near the area that you could build on. So if you did the 20 foot on Rollingwood Drive and 5 foot on BK's Road, you'd still have a building pad that you could use.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
yes, yes.
Okay. Now, let's just, and so we're on that. Are we ready to move on to the next lot? 3012.
It sounds to me that we essentially reached a consensus on those three. Am I wrong?
Well-
I think we did.
Set out one thing, I'm not ready yet to commit on impervious cover, removing all impervious cover. I want to think about that.
I
Well,
agree with that.
When I say remove it, I'm just saying take it to that is an engineering issue, and it needs to be addressed like we address the residential drainage. We have a criteria manual for residential lots, and I'm suggesting that we expand that to be to the commercial lots, to where
Well-
the engineers have to show that they're not creating a drainage issue.
I think the drainage already applies to commercial. And we have in addition, there's an impervious cover requirement that's, as I understand, calculated differently for under TCEQ regs than what we have under our ordinance. And what I want to do, and I'll be upfront about it, is to take a look at these properties and get a sense of what that impervious cover does in terms of tree coverage and other aesthetic issues
Okay.
before I commit to it.
Okay, that's I think that's a good way to look
Yeah,
at it.
And Brooke, I would agree with you if your issue with impervious cover is primarily aesthetic. I think that's one thing that, the impervious cover limitations does help with the aesthetic in terms of green space and trees and things like that. So I agree with you. If you're worried about the aesthetic, that's the thing to look at.
Yeah, and Brooke, from a drainage standpoint, please understand, I'm not talking about that we just do away with it. I'm saying we do away with the impervious cover deal, but we put that back on the engineers to determine whether or not that is going to be a factor that we deal with. The aesthetics I agree with, and that's a little bit different deal.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the drainage part of it, I think that the 50% that we have there is an arbitrary number, and we can look at it a lot of different ways. But I'd rather have the true engineering to where they have to show they're not creating a drain. They have to detain their own waters, so they're not going to be creating a drainage problem for Rollingwood or downstream neighbors on that. And it may have to be a little tighter than even our drainage criteria manual, but I suspect that that's what I would like to see, that the engineers actually do the drainage.
Mhm.
The aesthetics, I agree with. I'm there with you on that.
I will say, speaking to neighbors who are downstream, that the existing regulations for residential do not prevent water from rushing down and accumulating at a level that we have never seen before, or that those neighbors had never seen before. So
Yeah.
I'm not one to congratulate us for our excellent
No.
drainage rules in the residential areas and then want to apply them to commercial.
No, as I said, I think they need to be strengthened. That drainage criteria manual, I assumed was a first step in getting there. And obviously we have other drainage issues we have to deal with, but we're going to have to, and it may be that we have to keep the impervious cover to deal with that. But that's, again, that's a engineering issue as to how they get to that on the drainage side. The aesthetic side, different animal. I agree. And Brooks, I'm glad you brought that up.
Well,
I think that's an important consideration. So
and I want, I did a lot of driving around on Saturday and Sunday, looking at where the water's flowing, and I just want to do my homework on that one.
I appreciate that. 3012 is a vacant lot, but it's got a plat and they're going to build on it, and it has a 30-foot rear setback, and right now it has a 20-foot front setback. On this lot, because of the configuration of it and the topography, I had assumed this was going to just be a small office building, and I had recommended that my recommendation is 5 foot on the front setback, 30 foot on the rear setback.
And Tom, just to be clear, because they had their concept plan into the city, we can't weigh in on their zoning. They're subject to the old zoning code, so we could just skip this property.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I agree that we can't, that they have whatever their established legal rights are,
Yeah, they have vested
exist.
rights in the old zoning code.
Right, but if we're talking about getting rid of the front setbacks, that might change their plans. And so it seems to me that we should.
If they change their plans, then they won't have vested rights anymore.
I 100% agree with that. I'm not arguing with you. They have vested rights in the zoning as it exists today. I don't see that as a reason for us not to give a recommendation for the future if they choose to take advantage of the new rules that we recommend rather than the old rules.
I just think it would be
once a new use comes along, or a new development, a new owner comes along, they can choose to conform to the new rules if they choose.
Well, and keep in mind, Amber, all of these properties that are already built are in the same boat.
Yes.
They're vested and grandfathered too. So
right, but this one, if this one gets to do new building under the old zoning, so it's a lot different than the other properties.
I understand.
We could talk about it, but I just thought I'd save everybody time, because this has already been established what their zoning rights are.
Yeah. I realize this may be a touchy one, but all of them apparently are so far anyway. All four of these, we're dealing with 5 of them. We're dealing with. This one is got currently it's being built on a 20-foot front setback and a 30-foot rear setback. That's the old zoning code.
Is there anybody who knows the terrain there?
Yes, it's
I thought
about
someone
30-degree slope. Part of this lot used to be, and Brooke, you probably, I think, Wally, you and Brooke and I used to drive down Peak Road to Rollingwood Drive.
Yep.
And that part of Peak Road was dedicated, half of it to this lot and half of it to number 10 Peak Road.
Remember when it was done?
And it's a good 30-degree slope.
Yes.
From the bottom of it to the top.
Does it access off of Bee Cave Road, or is it off of South Peak?
You actually can get there both ways, but I am guessing that he'll have a Bee Cave Road address. It's on a curve, and it is very, with the current road configuration, it would be awkward to make a right-hand turn or a left-hand turn out of that property.
Right.
I'm betting it's gonna, Amber, it's gonna come off of Peak Road.
No, it is not coming off of Peak Road. It's coming off of Bee Cave, but it'll be right in, right out only.
Okay. So it's still gonna be interesting getting in now.
So Amber, is it gonna have its own dedicated access point off of Bee Caves, or is it gonna share with anyone else?
There's no room.
Plan to have its own access.
Okay, yeah, they're just gonna, I mean, I guess they're gonna build it into that hillside.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the old plan that I looked at 10 years ago. Had a septic system on the roof.
Wow.
Yeah,
Very modern.
Yeah, they
Very
are
modern.
proposing to connect to,
sewer.
yes.
Okay. I'm just telling you what it was. I don't
Yeah,
know what
it
it
was
is
weird.
now, but it used to be, the original plan showed a septic system on the roof.
Is, is,
Green roofs are all the rage.
is there sewer there?
It's on Peak. He would have to pump up to Peak and he
Okay.
could tie in there.
Hey, Tom, maybe it helps on this one to take a look at 10 and
Yeah.
3010 and 3008 to answer the question of what the existing buildings, how far they are away. Maybe
Sure.
we can
Good
recommend
idea.
something straight across for all three, since they're all the same.
My estimation on 3010 is around 50 feet. I think I went over the line just slightly there, but it's right at 50 feet. And it's right at 75 feet on 3008
From the residential.
from the residential lot. But the residential lots, these are both built into the side of the hill. And the residential lots are much higher elevation than these two. And I'm, for the life of me, can't see where you would, I mean, if you expanded these, it wouldn't be you could bring them a little closer to BK's Road, but anything you do on these lots, you have to excavate out. So I'll give you my recommendation is 5 feet on the front and a 30-foot on the rear, just to start with on that. Although I just don't see how you would get even to the 30 feet because of the topography there.
Do you know how deep those lots are? From Bee Cave to the back lot line?
I can give you my guess. It's roughly on 3010, it's about 100 feet, and on 3008, it's a little bit more, up 150 almost at the most.
And 3010 is the compounding pharmacy, I think.
Yeah.
What
Tom,
address is the compounding pharmacy?
I think it's 3010, Wally.
310. That's what I thought.
And then Abercrombie Jewels is 3008.
That's correct.
Tom, this is
Yeah.
Dave Raymond.
Hey, David.
Hey, I don't mean to throw a monkey wrench into what everyone's doing at the moment, but I did see on the agenda that there was going to be a discussion on number 7 on the park as how it relates to the comprehensive plan, and being the park the commission liaison member of this strike force, I'd like to be part of that. However, this part of the meeting is dragging on a little bit too long for me to stick around very much longer. I don't know if I can ask to table that discussion so that I can participate in another meeting.
I think given the timing on the park deal, I think Mo had asked me to put that on the agenda, and I did. And obviously, we're not going to get through all of BK's Road. I don't have a problem unless I'd actually planned to go till 5:30 and then take the 30 minutes on the park. David, if that works, or do you want me to, well, we're close to 5:30.
We're like 5 minutes from 5:30, so.
Would y'all object if we just table the rest of this to our next meeting? And I've scheduled some other meetings that we can continue up on this. It'd be better if you haven't had the opportunity to look at each of these properties, everybody. It certainly makes a big difference once you look at them to see where they all are in
My only
relation.
comment is if we could come to a rough consensus on 12, 10, and 8 in the next 5 minutes, that would be valuable if David could wait 5. But if we can't come to a rough consensus on those 3, then yeah, just say.
I have to be somewhere at 6 o'clock, so, and it'll take me 10 minutes to get there. So I'll let you guys work the time.
Yeah, Ryan, let's just switch over to our next item, and then we can come back with this. I hate to do this because this is kind of my last since I can get to it.
Then I will second David's motion to for the moment, postpone this item and go to the next one.
Very good. Thank you, Ryan. All right. Without dissent, we'll go ahead and do that. Item number 7, discussion and possible action on the park as part of the city's comprehensive plan. And Mo, would you like to start off our discussion on this?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I was just wanting to get the group's feedback on the 2 pending changes. To my recollection, they haven't been discussed before. Apologies if they have, within the strike force. One is the commercial food establishment at the park, and the other is the expansion of the tennis courts at the athletic center. With one of the purposes of that is to introduce league play. We already have league play for swimming, and so this would be for tennis. Tom, I'm not really sure what goes next. I mean, that's what I wanted to put out there as
I appreciate it. Well, let's talk about the Western Hills Athletic Club is actually a private club, but it is, for whatever reason, it is zone park.
Yeah.
Which has its own set of rules that you have to go through and do that. Diana, I'm sorry, I've got Diana's raised her hand. Diana, would you like to say something? Ms. Wallace? No, I guess not. Okay. Amber, Ashley, oh, I guess I don't see that now. So my personal feeling on the club deal, I think they had a couple of technical issues that they had to deal with the city council, which they, I think, met last week and did that. Amber, you want to bring us up to date on that? As I haven't followed that as close as I probably should have.
About what happened with the club, the athletic club?
Yes.
The council did approve, it went to council to have their off-street parking, their fencing, landscaping, plans approved, and the council did approve those things. Now they have to turn around and go to the Board of Adjustment on the 30-foot green belt buffer between the park district and the residential district, but that doesn't exist today. They have to go to the BOA to also request extending their nonconformity. They want to build 2 more tennis courts, so they need to do that. And then they're also going to the BOA to occupy the setback. And so, which is what they do today. So some of those things are kind of cleaning up what's already happened. But they will be at the Board of Adjustment on June 22nd.
Okay. I've got a hand up. Ashley, can you see who that is?
I can. That is Diana Wallace. And Diana, if you're still wanting to speak, I'm going to ask you to unmute. So maybe that might give you the chance on your computer if you do want to speak. I'm not showing her unmuting. So maybe a technical error. And Diana, you can call in as well. There's a phone number on the agenda.
I'm unmuted.
Oh, there
I'm
you go.
unmuted.
We can hear you.
I'm unmuted, I think.
Okay, yeah, this is a little confusing. I apologize. I realize that we've moved over to the other, but I'm scrambling to catch up, and I am one of the strongly affected properties there on Bee Cave Road, rolling Timberline Drive, 5006 Timberline Drive. I live there. Right next to me is Tina Butcher. On the eastern side is Elizabeth Bray. We're all on, and we're scrambling to figure out what the TCAD get maps are, the Google maps are and such. We can't tell exactly what addresses we are talking about in back of us. I realize that y'all have been jumping around some, but it's really hard to tell from the map what's going on, which properties are affected. Dealt with Tina in the past. I'm right east of her, and just east of me is Elizabeth, and there's another spot up on Timberline Drive. But we're sort of that arc. That's Westgate Circle over there. We are sort of that arc in there that borders on Bee Cave Road that had the whole hillside excavated on us, and is the one that's been the grounding for, as you well know, a lot of issues over the years and very ingrained distrust of what's going on. So I apologize for derailing us from the other, but there's some of us that on here that really need some info we haven't been able.
We're losing your audio, or I'm losing it. But we have not gotten to that. The property you're talking about is 3006 Bee Cave Road.
Well, I stopped talking. I was giving to.
Oh, sorry. The property that backs up to y'all is 3006 Bee Cave.
Well, see, that's what I'm trying to find out. I'm trying to find out what one is back.
I lost you.
On Timberline Drive, that 5006 Timberline Drive.
Right. But
that's what I'm hearing.
As well as I'm not catching it. The audio is anybody else getting it?
No.
I'm not getting it.
Let me just say, we have not gotten to Elizabeth and Ms. Butcher and Ms. Wallace. We haven't gotten to 3006, and I don't think we'll get to it on this meeting. We'll probably take that up at the next meeting we have, which I'm going to recommend to be the 7th of June, and try to take up these properties 3012, 3010, 3008, and 3006 at that meeting. Okay. Elizabeth?
Hi, I would just like to comment that Diana's hand has been raised for about 20 minutes. And she consistently has trouble with the Zoom interface. I think at the time that you called on her, she tried to respond and Zoom kicked her off.
Oh, sorry.
So there are technological problems that I just thought
I appreciate it.
Be made aware of. And no, I couldn't hear her either. But I was also looking for drawings or a map that illustrated the properties under discussion this evening, and I did not see anything like that in the packet.
Okay, I'll make sure that they get in the packet for next week on that. Or
Okay.
2
Well,
weeks from now.
All right. Well,
I
thanks very
apologize.
much. Okay.
Should have been. Okay,
Tom,
yes, Brooke.
Brooke. I see that item number, I'm worried about our posting for the comprehensive plan when we're being asked now to comment on 2 matters that are pending before the council or other city bodies. Item 7 is a notice for action as a part on the park as a part of the comprehensive plan. And what we're being asked to comment on are 2 specific proposals that a lot of people in the community are concerned about. And I just don't think it's proper posting for us to discuss or give reaction on those 2 items.
Okay,
So I'd move a point of order. I think we're posted to talk about the park as a part of the comprehensive plan, but I don't think we're posted to talk about those 2 items specifically.
okay. I think you may be right on that.
This is Ryan. I think that means that we certainly couldn't, if that's right, we couldn't take any action on it, but at least we could let people talk if they wanted to talk about it.
Yeah.
We could hear people. I assume there's no problem with hearing people because it is, the park
that
was
is correct.
posted.
So,
Well, actually, if that's, Brooke's interpretation, having the discussion and not letting the public know you're going to have that discussion is not in line with the Open Meetings Act.
In other words, not everyone would take item number 7 and know that they should come into this meeting and talk about those 2 items.
Right.
Yeah.
The posting is broad and it says discussion of the park. I mean, if somebody has an issue that they want to talk about with the park, I think that would be permissible.
I think it would be permissible, yes.
all right, well, let's just do that and no action will be taken. But if you want to make a comment on it, which I think Mo, that is what actually Mo asked for. Mo, are you still on here? I guess no. Oh, there you are. David, would you like to discuss this, understanding that we can't take any action on it?
Well, I want to give Mo a chance to talk about it if he wanted on there. I agree. It is pretty broad. I think there's, depending on the direction it heads. I think there's not a lot we have the ability as a comprehensive planning group to take action on, but people can certainly discuss it as part of the whole.
And let me say, I tried to put that on there fairly broad, Brooke, because I did not want us to interfere with the other agencies, but we were going to take a look at the park as part of our only as it met with our comprehensive planning process. So that's where we were on that.
Maybe I misunderstood, but what I heard was that Mo wanted to get feedback on those 2 pending changes before the council, and I just don't think we're properly posted for that.
Yeah, and let me say this. Let me say this. I think the way it's posted, I think I think that the Western Hills Athletic Club discussion, that's squarely in front of council, and I have some question about whether or not that's covered by the way it was posted. Mo brought up and I think Mo, you're probably referring to the milk and cookies proposal as a potential park concession. That's something that's an RCDC now and being discussed now in RCDC. I'm the RCDC liaison to the task force, and I think way it's worded is broad enough to include some discussion on that. I certainly don't mind having a discussion here. But then, don't forget that, RCDC's, it's still pending in RCDC, and there'll be more discussion of it there as well.
Okay. Alex, I think you've got your hand up.
Yeah, can you guys see me?
Yeah.
Hey, thanks. Alec Robinson here. I'm 4818 Rollingwood Drive. I live right across the street from the park. Really enjoyed so far listening to discussions and kind of what goes on in these meetings. This is our first time joining. Obviously, I'm concerned about, some of the discussions that have been happening around, putting a commercial food establishment basically right across the street from my house. It is encouraging to hear that you guys are talking about your concerns about traffic and things like that on Rollingwood Drive and setbacks, and like how people, the residents that had houses on South Peak would be affected by all these other properties. I mean, I feel that that's the same. I hope that you guys are doing the same thing and talking the same way about us, because I mean, no one in the world came and even knocked on our door and asked us what we thought about this. It's just, it's frustrating. It seems like one of the first things as a neighborhood and as a community, we would go and knock on our neighbors' doors that were going to be impacted by this and get their feedback and opinion on this. I mean, I have some numbers on this, and I'm not going to share them on this. But it's pretty staggering, this stuff. But one of the two things I did want to point out is, like, one, this is green space, this is parkland that we were fortunate enough to acquire in the 90s, okay? And we don't have a lot of it, it's all we have. And why do we want to sell out to make a few bucks and get rid of our green space? Once it's gone for good. That's one thing. Look at the park master plan, you can see that we don't have a lot of unprogrammed, like, good space that can still be used for recreational activities. Second thing is, I loved hearing all this stuff about the Bee Cave Road, and I understand now, listening to this, about some of the challenges that we're facing. But the plats on there, if you look at the, I pulled up some of the stuff from this committee. It was done in 2019, some of the retail study, or I can't remember the exact name of the plan, but it showed that the plats, like, we're about 9% in highest and best use case for our commercial, commercial zone that we already have. So this seems like the milk and cookies idea seems like a great thing to try and put in there to improve that utilization number, which then could drive more change down there that would help improve the walkability, bring up our revenues without, like, destroying the neighborhood, the central part of our neighborhood, and the traffic concerns that I have around that. But that's all I really wanted to say. And thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Alec. David Raymond, I think you're on the Park Commission. Would you like to talk about how this would fit in with our comprehensive plan?
Well, Alec, I appreciate your input on it, and we are the Park Commission is receiving a lot of input from neighbors like yourself that feel like yourself on the subject. It was brought up in the last Park Commission meeting as well, kind of the same way you found out about it. It was just on our agenda, and they wanted to discuss it with us. We made no action on it, and there was no action to be taken for the park as far as the Park Commission was concerned. I personally, I question that the reasoning behind something like that too. But I'm here to support the neighbors in the majority on what they want to do. And what I've been hearing is that I hear a lot of people that do not support that idea.
Okay, thank you, David. Phil, I think you had your hand up for a moment. Did you have a comment?
If you're talking to me, I
Yes.
did not have my hand up.
Oh, sorry.
I think David covered it very well. I too am hearing a lot of concern and desire not to do this in the park. And I would agree with Alex that I think developing and I would love to see milk and cookies in our commercial corridor. I think it's a perfect fit. But yeah, I didn't have my hand raised. So thanks,
sorry.
Tom. All right, no worries.
Brooke, if I get out of line on this, just reach over and bop me. Just tell me, and I'll make sure that I try to keep it within the legal bounds here. So.
Were you taking other comments, or you want comments from me?
It'd be a good time. I'm just trying to keep it within the conditions that we set on taking comments on this from a standpoint of not addressing.
Right. I think my concern is not in not taking comments from the public who feel impacted by the proposal, but I don't think we as a strike force are properly noticed to take any action of any sort, come to any recommendation on either of those two items. So, but I'm certainly happy to hear comments from the public on it.
Okay.
And I will also say, I think one of the things is, I will offer a little bit of a different viewpoint in that, I've heard comments from people opposing it and raising some issues. And I've heard comments from a lot of people who like the idea of having it as a amenity in the park and as a park concession. I think, one of the things is, I think people, keep on referring to it as a, commercial enterprise in the park. And I think a lot of people lose sight of the fact that, park concessions are not an anomaly. They're, if you look around at parks, both on the federal level as well as the local level, there's park concessions. And if you look at, Zilker Park, for instance, there's park concessions. And I think one of the things at, the RCDC level we're looking at is, whether or not there's any things we can do to, allow its use as a park concession, and at the same time, really listen to concerns that neighbors have and make sure that that serious impacts are going to be avoided to neighbors.
Okay.
And so, I mean, it's still pending, it's still under consideration. And I think there's still work to be done on it one way or the other.
It's difficult to really opine on this subject, in my opinion, because as the strike force was put together and as it was related to the park at all, we were charged to make a survey and get people's input on what they want to see happen and change and not change about Rollingwood and commercial and utilities and other things. And this subject about a business proposition was never even brought up because it wasn't available at the time. And so it's hard to have an opinion as a strike force on this subject matter when we would have to go back and ask the public again. Okay, well, now what do you think about this particular issue, which we didn't consider in the survey?
Well, one of the documents, David, that David Raymond, that we did address when we were looking at our comprehensive plan was the parks master plan. And we do have a parks master plan. And Amber, when was that? That was fairly recent that was completed.
Yeah, 2018.
Yeah. And so what I had planned to do is not so much address these two items. And Mo, I'm sorry that I didn't post this close enough to do that. But if we wanted to address I think our posting is sufficient to talk about the park master plan that was done in 2018 and some of the issues with that. Brooke, am I within bounds on that?
Let me make sure I'm, I think we would be, I'm sorry. I think we would be in bounds on that, but I think we also, the survey, what we do need to do before we talk about the park or finish what we're doing on the commercial corridor is look at what the community's told us in the survey, which we've not focused on that. I read over, because of this item on the agenda, I did read over what the survey addressed in terms of the park. And there were people who commented, a few, about wanting some kind of food and beverage in the park, but there were lots and lots and lots of people who commented on, we have limited park space and we don't want that kind of thing in the park. So I think in what this committee can do is talk about our job, which is to look at the surveys and listen to the community and come up with something that we believe makes sense for the community. But to take that to two specific pending proposals, I think would be incorrect. But I think we can talk about the park plan, and I think we can talk about the feedback we've gotten from the survey, and we need to do the latter too.
To Brooks' point, what are we doing with the data as far as getting some kind of analytics out of it that came from the survey?
I should have some of that back this week from Bowie and Company.
Okay,
David. They've been working on it, but I should have it back. I think the 28th was the delivery date on that.
And this might be, I think this is just my opinion, but I might have stated this months ago. I view this strike force as the idea behind it is to represent the community and not just be a go-between between us and some indeterminate group of more citizens of Rollingwood. Yeah. And so I think, in my opinion, we're allowed to have an opinion. I'm comfortable having an opinion as a group where it's appropriate and allowed. And even if it means we didn't, for every single opinion, survey a larger constituency. While we are doing that, and I think it's great, I don't think that's a required, for me, it's not a required step for every single recommendation or action we're going to take.
And Mo, I'm guessing you're ground zero on at least part of this. I don't think there's anybody closer to the park that I'm aware of.
No, and it's a small community. You'd be amazed at the number of calls and texts I got this week since I haphazardly brought it up a week ago. It's funny.
Mo, are you on Rollingwood Drive?
I'm on Wallace. The side of my lot is the tennis court fence.
Well, and I think this facility, the Milk and Cookies, would face Rollingwood Drive. So you would be on the back side and across the park from it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. The park, we hear the baseball, but the park's pretty kind of out is behind us. There's no visibility to it.
Right.
Obviously the athletic club is right there. And we bought the house after the athletic club was there. So this isn't, I'm glad it's there. We have a membership. But to Alex's points, so as a citizen, I want to make sure the strike force takes into account the neighborhood's views and the citizens who attend the strike force views as much as possible. We have the same issues with parking or having to put cones in our in the streets since people inadvertently block our driveway, et cetera, et cetera. And the athletic club is hands off on all that stuff. And with the park, again, high level, I haven't looked at the master plan probably since 2018, but I think that would be a great item to discuss. I think the strike force can have opinions about whatever we want, but or whatever we're allowed to. But certainly for me as a citizen, sort of the usage of a third to half the park by dogs every night or almost every night is something I have an opinion on. I'm not sure if it's valid for the strike force as part of the master plan or as part of looking back on that to have an opinion on.
That would be part of the park master plan. So I think that would probably be open for discussion for us.
Yeah. And so,
And
yeah, so I think at a high level, it's definitely appropriate. And then if even if we gave notice, I'm not sure what's allowed for us to discuss with regards to pending items before council in the future.
I might be able to answer some of that, Mo. As far as the park commission is concerned, we do consider the park master plan quite a bit. It's talked about quite often, and we do take consideration of what capital project improvement projects we can do and what are feasible, what's not, and all with the master plan as the bedrock to that conversation.
And you know, it was adopted. The park, I just want to say the park master plan was adopted by the city on that.
Right.
And in that, probably the issues we have, and I'll try to put a few some on this. When we bought the park, it did have a deed restriction that we lease it and we use it for youth athletics. And that was a deed restriction. We were fortunate to be able to get the park. I always hesitate to tell people how close we came to not having a park there. We actually had a check that we got from the city of Austin for overcharging us on water for $250,000, which was the purchase price of the park. And we had an election, and I'm going to get this wrong, but I think the vote was 55% to 45% to buy the park. So it wasn't a landslide to have it at the time, but I'm glad we did. It's a great addition to our city.
Was the one-time plan to potentially, was it lease management of the park? That was after the master plan? Do you remember what I'm talking about a couple years ago?
We leased the park to the Western Hills Little League the first year that we got it in the 90s. And
I
since
thought there was
that
a plan
time,
a couple years ago to potentially lease operations of it or outsource that.
it's been changed 2 or 3 times, Mo.
All right,
But
yeah.
in any the city has not been running the leagues. It's been girls softball, little league, and then they lease it back and forth to people. But the overall intent and the deed restriction calls for that to be used for youth athletics on that. So, and I think one of the we'll have to continue this because I'm trying to get to my 6 o'clock. David Smith, did you have something you wanted to address on that first before I leave?
No, I mean, I will, kind of since you brought it up, I'll echo the comments, but I will preface it by saying it's something I want to have more dialogue at the park commission level and also the RCDC level. And this goes to what you said about the park and the deed issue. I've been looking at the off-leash dog use in the park, and I have some pretty serious concerns from both from a legal perspective. I think we have some pretty serious legal exposure there, but also from a health and safety issue and from a park management issue, primarily having to do with incompatibility issues. As a matter of park management principles, you're supposed to manage a park for the use for which it was intended. In this case, children's athletics, youth athletics, and you can consider any other uses so long as they're compatible uses. And there's a number of different problems with the current off-leash dog use. One of the things I think the master plan really speaks to is the need to have a separate dedicated off-leash dog use area. And, you know, kind of as a principle of park management, this is the reason why City of Austin and other municipalities don't allow any dog use in children's athletic fields. Really, as a matter of principle, you know, off-leash dog use shouldn't be allowed in areas where kids play. As a corollary to that, kids should not be allowed to play in off-leash dog areas. The two need to be spatially separated. And so I know David's here, I know Phil's here, and I, you know, kind of from an RCDC standpoint, I want to really kind of encourage us. I know at one time there was a money offer or a potential contributor, but I really want to, you know, I think it behooves us all on a number of different levels to if an off-leash dog area is important to our community, to move towards realizing a separate dedicated off-leash dog use area, and also figure out a way, and I think there's some smart ways that I'm willing to discuss off of this to basically allow or require, you know, permits to both ensure health and safety, but also and tags, but also to basically have funding for maintenance, because maintenance and upkeep on a dedicated off-leash dog area is pretty substantial. But I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
I think there's some work to be done. I just want to see it get done.
Well, this is what I would propose to put on next agenda. I would like to finish our BK's Road at least on the north side. And then if we have time, at that time, we'll take up the park again. And kind of go from that standpoint. I do have 3 dates that I would like for us to consider to continue this. I'd like to go ahead and get this done as quickly as I can. If unless we have some objections, I'd like to do this on the 7th, the 14th, and the 21st. It's 3 weeks in a row that we knock this out. Next week is, of course, Memorial Day, so we're not going to meet on Monday for that date.
Tom, this is Ryan.
Yes, sir.
Alec just went away, but he had his hand up for like 10 or 15 minutes there. And if he still wants to speak, I was hoping you could.
Alex, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. I want to talk to, I'll be 60 seconds, maybe less. One, this is not a concession stand like you would see. If we're talking about a concession stand to support like sports, kids sports, we have a concession stand that can be open during the times that the games are played. Okay, this is a commercial business that they say will make us $75,000 a year in tax revenue. You guys do the math to figure out how many transactions that is. There's no way that this is not going to bring in people on cars from across the city. I mean, we don't have enough residents in this city to support what they're talking about. 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., 7 days a week. I mean, it's not a concession stand. So I would say that's not compatible with youth athletics. That was the main thing I wanted to point out. I just wanted to challenge that and make that.
Hey, Alec, to be clear, I was not saying it was a concession stand. I'm saying concession, which is a legal term of art.
Okay.
So I'll be clear on that. It's two different things.
Alex, thank you.
One comment I have on the dates, I would like for us to schedule before we do a lot more on either the Bee Caves Road or anything else, that we take some time and go through the survey, or that we take the survey pieces that relate to the subject matter like Bee Caves Road or the park, and we address the survey comments so that we understand them before we take up a substantive decision. So I'd like to suggest that.
Okay, I will. I'll start that. I'll start the agenda off with that.
Okay.
And I'd like to, if we get to somebody, oh, Wally, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'd like, the maps you gave were excellent. If we could have lot lines drawn so we have an idea when you're talking about it's this deep, it's that wide, because I have some opinions on some of this, but I don't have enough information here that I can express them, and I may change them if I see things.
Okay. I just drew those out, but I'll be glad to and understand some of them may be a foot or so off, but that's the best I could do with what I
A
had.
foot or two off is not an issue. Just to have a grasp for lot size approximately compared to another lot size. Saying a big lot and a small lot is not too helpful for me in
Right.
trying to figure out what my opinion is.
And Elizabeth, I will make sure that I get with you to give you the documents, because when we send them electronically, the lot lines don't always show up. So I'll make sure, I'll give you a call and make arrangements to get those to you, and you can share them with your neighbors there if you don't mind being the conduit there. So, okay.
Tom, your dates were the 7th, 14th, and 21st.
Yes,
But I
ma'am.
put down that we weren't going to get the Bowie surveys comments until the 28th.
28th of May. I'll have them this week.
Oh, okay. Got it.
And I'll make sure they're disseminated on that, so everybody will have those.
And I think our community needs them also. That's not my decision to make, but
No, I
that would
agree.
be a recommendation.
Yes. Ashley, I am correct. It's the 28th we get that back from Bowie. Is that right?
Yes, that's what I remember. I'll double check with them tomorrow, make sure we're still on track.
Okay. Well, thank everybody. Could I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
We have it. We have a second.
Second.
We have a second. Thank y'all. And without opposition, thank y'all very much. And we will continue.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.